After a nice showing when they beat the Rays 2 out of 3 games, the San Diego Padres, of course, as we all know, got blown out by the Giants, embarrassed by them. And how did they follow up with that? Losing to one of the National League's and one of baseball's worst teams. It's the same story as usual. The clown show continues. You know what you're listening to, so let's get started.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Monday, June 26th. And my lord, can the summer not go by faster? I would greatly appreciate that, and I think Padres fans can agree. As always, I am your host, with sometimes occasionally, but certainly not always the most, Javier Reyes. You can find me on Twitter at Javipeno, Javiipeno, or at LO_Padres if you only want tweets about the game. And lately, tweets being very sad about the game and about the state of the San Diego Padres. Or you could check me out on YouTube to see whatever I am wearing. I'm currently actually wearing a Clippers shirt. Don't worry, this isn't a support LA thing. Not that I think Padres fans will be even upset if I said such a thing at this time. It's like Los Clippers. It was like some Hispanic night thing, and my friend got it for my birthday, and it's really comfortable for some reason. So, and my favorite basketball player once played there. Thank you, as always, though, for making Locked On Padres your first listen every day. We're free and available on all platforms. On today's show, we got to recap this whole series, don't we? A depressing Monday series recap. You've come, in my opinion, the Padres, you've just gotten so used to everything. So while I usually start off my show acting like the Joker and doing the laugh, it's just become, I'm running out of bits. I'm running out of adjectives. I'm running out of words. My vernacular is lacking, maybe, for ways to describe how disappointing this Padres team has been. As I said in the intro, you come off of winning the 2 out of 3 games against the Rays. Then you have consecutive meltdowns against the Giants. Granted, a good team. Doesn't matter at this point. You know what? There's something I'm retiring from my vernacular. No longer using the bad team, bad pit, like just wins. At some point that's just what matters, because they've lost to bad teams plenty. So, and it's not like they've beaten the good teams either. So I can't just say, some ace National League pitcher struck us out tonight. No, I can't do that anymore. That after that series against the Rays, in which the pitching is awesome. Yes, I remember talking with Ulysses Sombrano of Locked On Rays. Go check him out. Great show. Where we mentioned, hey, it was a little bit chaotic, a little bit lucky in the Padres' favor because of the stolen bases and the errors by the Rays, that it was a little bit of a lucky series if you were to just take it in that sort of vacuum and not indicative of, necessarily being a better team than the Rays, if that makes sense. And they kind of proved us right in that respect, because then they get blown up by the Giants. They have that third game in the series after 2 consecutive walk-offs by the Giants. And they have that game where they leave everybody on base, multiple double plays, 2 from Juan Soto, and I'm pretty sure 1 from Bogaerts and almost one from Xander Bogaerts. I'm sorry. I believe he almost grounded into a double play. And Bogaerts on the season is about like 1 for 25 with runners on first and second, by the way. So that's not great. And after that, you scored 10 runs in the last game, and then you scored 10 runs on Friday. We'll leave that game for last as a little bit of a pick-me-up, just to feign any sort of excitement. And then you go into this national series, and then you lose the last 2 out of 3 games, scoring 0 runs to follow up your 10 score run on Friday. As I tweeted Friday Night Lights, it was very, very fun. After that, and then you get absolutely destroyed on Sunday, and that's the first game that we're going to talk about. You guys might see me just like lose it. You know what I mean? Like I am wondering if at some point, like I might just lose it. You know what I mean? Like I really might just lose it. Yeah, Bogaerts, by the way, batting 197 with runners in scoring position. Lovely. Sunday's game, the Padres have Seth Lugo back on the mound. He's been 2 starts back, 5 innings against the Giants, only 1 earned run on 1 walk and 5 Ks. This game a little bit less so. I've been saying that he's due for at least giving up some big contact He hasn't so much this season, but even still, it wasn't that bad. 5 innings, 3 earned runs on 7 hits, no walks, 4 Ks. He was okay. He does give up that absolute tank bomb. Who was it? To Logan Thomas? No, it was Candelario in the home first inning to deep right, 441 feet. Absolute bomb in that one. And the Padres actually respond with Tatis getting a single. One of the only players next to Ha-Seong Kim who feels like, or at least it feels like, and I don't have the numbers right in front of me, that have actually like really performed well with runners in scoring position. Like, he's had moments. Most other Padres have not. Whether it be Carpenter, whether it become Cronenworth, whether it be Manny Machado, whether it be Juan Soto, while he has been able to draw walks. Tatis and Kim, seemingly the only ones that I actually trust to do well with runners in scoring position. And then after that, they give up some more runs to Stone Garrett and Joey Meneses. Joey Four Bags, as a friend of mine used to call him. And then in the top of the 7th inning, Tim Hill comes in and absolutely implodes. He goes 1 1/3 inning, and he allows 5 runs technically, but they were all unearned because of an error. And it was by Tim Hill twice. So Tim Hill just protecting his ERA at 2.94. If you guys are curious about that, makes 2 throwing errors to first base in this game. 2. And it wasn't like a bunt down the third base line that you had to make a really crazy play and you beamed it to first. No, it was like a casual throw to first base after the ball got hit back to him. So lovely. And it's incredible, as I mentioned that last week, Tim Hill, there's a controversy over whether or not we should have just let him pitch for a 3rd inning in a row. Because all of a sudden Padres Twitter, like, loved Tim Hill, and he was like the best relief pitcher in baseball. All of a sudden they're like, wow, how could you do this? That was funny. Tim Hill, unfortunately, though, giving up those bunch of hits and the 2 wild pitches is enough for the Nationals to end up going in and getting more runs. Really tough. And then Joey Meneses hits a bases clearing sort of double, or not a bases clearing double, but a 2-run double. You get a home run from Ha-Seong Kim and then a single in the bottom of the 9th when you're already down by 6 from Juan Soto. Congratulations. Really appreciate it. This team is really bad, guys. I don't know really what else to say. There is just no fight, seemingly, in this team. The runners in scoring position, while it's a pretty baseline stat and not all that, deep, like, it really does sort of capture everything. You know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of every single thing that you were wondering about this team. If you're wondering why they haven't been good, it's because of runners in scoring position. And it's been the same thing for a while now. Every time you're asking them to do just a little bit, they don't come up. In fact, just to give you a perspective on runners in scoring position right now, Gary Sanchez, aside from Alfonso Rivas, who's only played 3 games, has the best batting average for runners in scoring position, but who cares about him? Gary Sanchez, 16 games only, but 286 batting average. Then Fernando Tatis Jr., like I said, with a 286 batting average with a scoring position. One of the only players, seemingly, that cares. And by the way, Gary Sanchez, is worth noting, has to pinch hit for Austin Nola in this game because for whatever reason, Austin Nola had to start. Even after Gary Sanchez, I'm pretty sure, hit a home run just 2 days before this. He doesn't get the start. He comes up, strikes out on a slider way away from the plate. Yes, there was a bad strike call in that at bat, but again, I just don't care, and I'm bored of blaming umpires for things, and I'm certainly bored of blaming umpires for this Padres team that just stinks in every facet. So that happens. Again, Tatis, basically out of the players who have played a good amount of games, it's him. Nelson Cruz, actually, 282 batting average with runners in scoring position. He, unfortunately, is only good when runners are in scoring position, which is nice. And Juan Soto, I was wrong. 281 average with him with runners in scoring position. Then Rougned Odor, 269. And then every batter after that is 208 or below, including Kim, Machado, Bogarts, who, by the way, they gave an 11-year contract to, Brett Sullivan, Matt Carpenter, who, by the way, stinks, and Trent Grisham, who, by the way, stinks, and Jose Azocar and Jake Cronenworth and Brandon Dixon. Just pretty rough. And if you're wondering about Nola, yeah, he's batting 53 with runners in scoring position. Yeah, man. I mean, just bang up job. Before we continue talking and getting more depressed, I just want to talk to you guys about a thing that kind of understands what team building is. And you know what that is? That's eBay Motors. They're good folks. Let me tell you guys. A championship team is about each player being a perfect fit, right? So if you don't want to be like the Padres, eBay Motors knows. Don't be like the Padres. You have to actually like step up, play to your, expectations, play to your talent, be helpful, be useful. That's what they do, guys. Same with your vehicle. So for parts that fit, head to eBay Motors and look for the green check when you're in the garage sort of section. They'll show you the parts. You can browse them and whatnot, and then you can kind of insert what your vehicle is, and then they'll show you whether or not that part works for your car. So that's really cool. So remember, guys, stay in the game with eBay Guaranteed Fit. ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only, and exclusions do apply, but still very cool stuff. Unlike the Padres. And we're back, everybody, here on the Locked On Padres podcast. Go check it out, blah, blah, blah. It's so funny that, and this is not unique to me, or I think unique to anyone, but people who cover teams oftentimes, and granted, it's just the internet, and granted, that might be a little bit of a bubble that I'm stuck in, but people oftentimes will get on you if you're being too negative, quote unquote. As if like people forget that it's not our job as content creators, usually for the most part, particularly journalists who cover the team for certain papers and websites and publications. And same goes for me as well, that it's not really your job to be positive about the Padres. You can be, but your job is to cover them and to talk about whether they're good or not. And yes, this episode has been really depressing so far, and I imagine some lovely soul is going to comment, "You're being so negative. If you don't like the team, they get out." But that's not our job. That's PR. That's social media. That's brand engagement. That's what they have to do. They have to make your team great and be optimistic and sell it to add revenue, investors, and all and such, right? That's not my job. So before anyone leaves that comment about how today's episode was depressing, there you go. It's funny that I have an analogy for you guys. A little bit, and it's going to make some people upset, but remember, this was back when they were still in San Diego, and that is the Chargers. I highly recommend everyone go check up, and by the way, if you hate the Chargers, you can look at this and you'll have a fun time. The 2010 Chargers, where SB Nation did a video of it, breaking down a really great analytics. John Boys and those folks, and Kofi and all those guys over at Secret Base, the kind of brand off of Sports Blog Nation. Really good stuff. And they did a video on the 2010 Chargers, who somehow finished the year with the number 1 ranked offense and the number 1 ranked defense, and they missed the playoffs. And what ended up being one of the problems, which they talk about, was just how catastrophically unclutch and particularly bad on special teams they were. It was actually, and they kind of emphasize this, it's actually impressive what the Chargers did. Dare I say more impressive than actually making the playoffs and winning some games, if they had, was the fact that they finished with number 1 on both sides of the ball and they still didn't make the playoffs. And I remember watching that. And look, again, I'm still a fan of that team, but trust me, Padres fans, yes, I'm new to the show, but I get the feeling of your team is incompetent. Trust me, I get it, right? The Padres are currently massively, massively, massively impressive as a team. Their ability to just not be even somewhat adequate on offense is actually impressive. So if you want to look at it that way, if you want to be if you want to joke around with your buddies and try and take things in stride, look at it from that perspective. And the perspective is that they just refuse. Again, with runners in scoring position, they're hitting 204 this year. If you want some perspective, the worst team with runners in scoring last year was the Pittsburgh Pirates, who, by the way, didn't have, a whole lot of talent. O'Neal Cruz only came up for that team a little bit later. No Andrew McCutchen. And Brian Reynolds had a bad year. And Cabrian Hayes is just not very good as an offensive player in general, but that's what it took. And they still hit 221. Well, the Padres currently are hitting 204, and the second closest, the Oakland A's. That's right. The team that literally gave up maybe 3 weeks into the season and said we're selling, that team has been more clutch than the San Diego Padres with runners in scoring position. More context. Last year, you might be wondering, what did the Padres hit with runners in scoring position? They hit 254, which was 16th best in Major League Baseball. That was without. This was without. No Fernando Tatis. No Juan Soto until after July. When was the deadline? Like August? I forgot. But no Juan Soto until then. No Xander Bogaerts. No Matt Carpenter. None of those guys. And I knock over Tatis's bobblehead. Whatever. Is it an omen? I don't know. But whatever. None of those guys. None of those guys. No Nelson Cruz. None of those guys. They were relying on Luke Voit, who wasn't even that great for them. And they were relying on Jorge Alfaro, who wasn't that great, but he hit when it mattered. He had the most game-winning hits by a Padre since like 96. Ha-Seong Kim, same thing. He was on the team, cool. Trent Grisham still couldn't hit. It was Manny Machado basically carrying the charge, but even still, the rest of the team found a way to be clutch. Xander Bogaerts, Juan Soto, who has gotten better recently, I understand, Tatis, etc. I mean, it's just, that's impressive, right? Like, you're getting what I'm getting at. The Padres this year are at a level that is actually genuinely impressive, given that they have the number one defense, that they're up there in basically every pitching category. I know that maybe that changed a little bit over the course of the weekend, and especially the Giants series. But if you've got a great bullpen, and you've been getting great starting pitching led by Blake Snell, and then Waka and Lugo have been really great back-end players. Waka's actually probably the second best pitcher on the team, if we're being honest. But you just are historically unclutch. Historically. I don't remember, I think it was Ben Kaspick who brought up that the Padres had the lowest batting average for runners in scoring position ever. I think that was when they were still below 200, so they hit a little bit better, I think, over like the next 2 games in that Giants series or something like that to probably boost it a little bit. And I'm not entirely sure how I can find the single season like worst runners in scoring position stuff aside from going through every single year, which I don't have the time for. But that's why I compare them to that Chargers team. Because all that Chargers team had to do was the bare minimum in order to just make the playoffs. Now, this Padres team on offense, all they had to do was the bare minimum. And here's the thing, by the way. Here's the thing. Unlike some of these other bad teams who don't hit like last year's Pirates, it wasn't expected, right? It just wasn't expected all that much. When you add all these players that the Padres have, it makes me almost wonder, are we sure that this is bad team management, or is just a collection of players that have no team chemistry, have maybe not great coaching, right? And don't get me wrong, and then that brings up the next question. Who should be blamed for the coaching hires, right? Sure, that's what goes on Preller. I'm just saying that there is a level of this that a lot of it needs to be put on players, because all they had to do was just not be the worst in baseball by a long margin with runners on. That's basically all this team needs to do. And this has been the case all year. All year. Just not be the worst. That's why I said it's actually kind of impressive. That Chargers team, all you had to do was not be the worst on special teams in the history of football. All the Padres had to do was not be the worst with runners in scoring position in the history of baseball. And they refuse. Saturday's game, same thing happened. They get shut out. Whatever. Classic stuff by Josiah Gray and Mason Thompson and Kyle Finnegan. Really ace-level quality players for sure. Let's see. Who even got the save for them? Hunter Harvey gets the save. Just leaving people on base. 7 runners left on base. Xander Bogaerts doesn't come up big. They actually bring up Matt Waldron from AAA, and they optioned him and sent him back down the next day. But 4 2/3, 2 earned runs. Not bad for a guy that you just call up. And we're not used to that from the Padres, being able to call up just a random dude to contribute for a little bit. But Bogaerts, 0 for 3. Machado, 1 for 4. Soto, he does go 1 for 2 with 2 walks. He gets 1 strikeout, but still he kind of did his job. Tatis, 2 strikeouts, 1 for 4, and a stolen base. Kim, unfortunately, goes 0-4 in this one. I do like the attempt by Melvin here to have Ha-Seong Kim be the leadoff. At least it feels like there's, like he's trying. But again, I still just don't. Yes, Melvin's made some mistakes, especially highlighted last week, potentially, depending on where you come down on that whole debate with Tim Hill and whether or not they should have used Hader and etc. Or Luis Garcia, I should say. But this just isn't on Bob Melvin. And again, I know it sounds weird, but if there's any sort of sick desire you take from being historically bad with runners on, historically not clutch, that almost feels like something that can't be immediately tagged to team building. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense. You know what I mean? It's almost like let's say the kind of point I'm getting at is if you had a great team and all the players got hurt, that's not necessarily something that you can tag with being, wow, we built a poor team. It's like, well, yeah, everyone was hurt. Or if, say, another football analogy, if your quarterback gets hurt and your team goes 3-13 and the receivers look bad and the line looks bad, it's like, well, yeah, but like you also had something really bad happen. So it's kind of hard to necessarily blame GMs and stuff for that, or coaches or whoever, right? Everyone deserves blame, is my point. And if you believe that Preller should be fired, I get it. I really do, because this is just insane. It's just insane. And for you not to have people, the micromanaging issues that he has as detailed in The Athletic, that needs to be brought up. But I'm just saying the runners in scoring position thing is so wild. And every single time the Padres, I'm going to say when they're down by 2, not 1. I'll give them 1 because the Padres can hit like some solo home runs, right? Like they are good at that. Love doing that. But every time we're down by 1 run, I'm like, that's it. Like, unless it happened early, like in the first inning, if it's, say, the 6th inning or later and it's 5-3 in favor of the other team, I'm like, oh yeah, the game's over. 6th inning, I'll say. I'm like, the game's over. They're not hitting anything. That's what it feels like. That's really what it feels like. And I love Ha-Seong Kim, and I was wrong about him being super clutch. He actually hasn't been. It's actually been Soto and Tatis for the majority. And somehow Gary Sanchez, who showed up like a week ago. I just don't get it. I don't get it. I'm going to take a sip of water, and then we're going to get into the last game, which was a happy game, but then still keep being sad at the same time. Don't you worry, everybody. The Clown Show will continue. Just give me 1 second. And we're back, everybody, here on the Locked On Padres podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, free and available on all platforms. You get the points. The Padres did come away with this weekend with 1 good win, and that was on Friday, in which they just absolutely bombarded the heck out of the Nationals, winning 13-3. Joe Musgrove, I think, is one of the positive developments. Again, he's been slowly getting on a roll. 7 innings in this game, which was really nice. Helped give the bullpen a little bit of a break. 6 hits, but only amounted to 1 earned run. Classic Musgrove, battling out of trouble despite giving up some leadoff hits. No walks, which was big, and 7 Ks. He's slowly rounding into form. His last start was good too, considering that he actually wasn't able to get many swings and misses. Start before that, and the Yankees start. I really think the Yankees start at Yankee Stadium 6 1/3 on that Friday night, only giving up a run, not walking anybody, and striking out 6. That, to me, felt like the Musgrove is this. It's finally back. Like, he's getting there. And don't get me wrong, I know he hasn't been dynamite, but he's never necessarily been a pitcher that I'm like, that guy is going to be dynamite for the whole year. That's never been the vibe with him. Instead, he's like a 3.4 ERA guy who can get you strikeouts and have really big clutch performances when you need them, as we saw in the playoffs last year. So that was really cool. And then the Padres have a RBI palooza. You get a Ha-Seong Kim home run in the bottom of the first, to which I tweeted out that if anyone has a problem with Ha-Seong Kim, that's fine. Just send me your address so I can come fight you. He then gets a single in the next inning. Manny Machado gets a fielder's choice. Xander Bogaerts gets what feels like his first big hit in a while. That basically ends the game. 3-run home run, allowing himself, obviously, and then Tatis and Bogaerts to score, and Machado to score, making it 7-0. Juan Soto gets a double, bringing in Tatis. Nelson Cruz drives in some runs. Again, it's so weird how much like Nelson Cruz has been able to be just completely inept if nobody's on base. It's like he gives up. It's like I've made the joke about Nelson Cruz this year having a very just get up there, take my 3 hacks and sit down type of approach. But I think it's because when he sees nobody on base, he's like, oh no, like I'm going to have to run if people hit. That's the vibe that I'm getting from Nelson Cruz. I know that's not true. I know they're trying, but stick with me, guys. Let's do some fan fiction here. It's the only thing we can do to keep our morale up. But Nelson Cruz hitting a single, allowing Cronenworth to get to third, and Juan Soto and Gary Sanchez to score. It's just really funny to me how that works. And again, Juan Soto, Also homers in this one, 2-run home run. This team is exceptionally good at homering and getting more runs when they're already up by 5. So congrats to them on that. Really impressive on their front. And I think I got mixed up, by the way. Gary Sanchez homered. What was it? Wait, hold on. Didn't Gary Sanchez homer? Am I crazy, or didn't he homer this weekend? Ha-Seong Kim, Gary. Where's Gary? When did he? Was it the last Giants game then? I guess. Anyway, whatever. 13-3. Talked about Joe Musgrove. Really good start. And then Adrian Morejon actually comes up for the first time in a while, actually. And he was good in this one. An inning. Doesn't give up an earned run. And then the next day, he isn't very good, in which he walks 2 and then only got 1 out. That wasn't great. Adrian Morejon, I kind of don't have any takes on him anymore. I think he can be better than some of the bad bullpen guys that we've had. So, I think he could be better than Garcia. Nabil Krismat just elected free agency after getting waived. He can be better than, your Carlson, guys like that. I think he can even be better than a Honeywell sometimes. But other than that, it's not like a dynamite guy that they're adding to this pen. The dynamite guys are Robert Suarez and Drew Pomeranz. But Pomeranz I've heard nothing about. And Suarez has been slowly reworking, so he could come back soon. But the whole point is, I don't even know if it matters at this point. Again, we're trying to have happy vibes here at the end. But Suarez, even when he does come back, the Padres, it's looking like they're going to have to go 51-33 to match 88 wins. And potentially get a wild card spot. That's what it feels like this year. Anything can happen. The season isn't over, but it does feel like it's over. And there are so many people bringing up that 2019 Nationals team. You see it on broadcast where they compare the two teams. They compared the Padres. What was their batting average? What was their OPS? What was their ERA through this amount of games? But the Nationals are an outlier. You know what I mean? The same way that the Miami Heat in the NBA this year were an outlier as a play-in team that somehow made it to the NBA Finals. If you're the Padres and if you've been watching this team all year, it's just troubling. And I know that even other rival hosts, Ben Kaspick on this podcast on Friday was like, look, I think they're going to get better. Their run differential's good. They have good defense. They have good pitching. You just have to not be, like I keep making with this Chargers analogy, historically and impressively bad in a certain aspect of your team, which in this case is runners in scoring position. With the Chargers, it was special teams. So, and again, I just, this is, and I haven't been following the team as much, but I am wondering, what's worse between this and the collapse? I think it's this, because this is embarrassing. Them and the New York Mets, the Padres and the Mets, have been just unbelievably embarrassing, not just for themselves, but for the sport. For you to be spending this much money, making all these splashy moves, and instead it's the Giants who signed Michael Conforto, Sean Manaea, and Mitch Haniger, right, that are the team that's actually more clutch than you. It's just unbelievable, for them to be this bad. Is the season over? Really feels like it, and it's been a long time. Right? This isn't just me overreacting to a few weeks. It's been 2.5 months, almost 3. This is not just a, wow, they'll figure it out. When are they going to figure it out? You beat the Rays. Oh, wow, we're getting excited again. You're just completely allergic to getting a sweep, of course. And then you nearly get swept by the Giants, and then you lose to the Nationals. At some point, that matters. The vibes are just not changing at all. And I know we have an off day today. Thank God, to be honest with you. Just thank God. Just I hate watching this team right now because it's impressive. Taking bad pitches, allowing pitches to go right down the middle, not hitting, not making contact. In the case of someone like Jake Colonel, when you make contact, I swear it's like a foul ball at the top of the tip of the bat that goes right behind the plate. Maybe even it almost hits the catcher. Just unable to hit contact. And by the way, really interesting to note, the guys we extended, Yu Darvish and Jake Cronenworth, have been bad, but of course the ones we haven't extended, Blake Snell and Ha-Seong Kim, have been great. Running out of things to say, to be quite honest with you. I don't know, and we're probably going to talk about this on a future episode, maybe tomorrow. I don't know. I might have some guests on for tomorrow. We'll see how that pans out, but there's a real question of what should this team be sellers at the deadline? For one thing, no, in the sense that they're not designed to be a selling team. They would be a very massively interesting team if they sold. You got guys like Waka, even Lugo, I think could fetch you something. Blake Snell could certainly fetch you something. Juan Soto could certainly fetch you something. But other than that, like, you're not trading Tatis, you're not trading Manny, and even if you wanted to trade Manny, I don't think you can, because he's been really bad this year and he has a giant contract. So if you want to call up the Yankees and try and get them to the same team that just refuses to cut Josh Donaldson, even though they're richer than anybody combined, listening to this podcast, if they listen to it 1,000 million times, they're more richer than all of us. They're not going to take him on. So Darvish probably would have been actually not even probably, definitely, he has the name value and all that stuff. Definitely would have been an interesting commodity at the deadline, but they extended him until he's 40. So again, I don't know. It does feel like, though, as of right now, that this team is just going to be nowhere. At some point, you need to see something. There are other teams that you see something. And I mentioned the New York Mets earlier. Right when they're looking okay, they have a bullpen explosion yesterday. Multiple people getting hit with the bases loaded on the Philly side, which allows them to win. Bogarts, all these guys. Yes, AJ Preller deserves a lot of blame. And if there is someone to fire, I think it would be AJ Preller. I really do. I think that at some point, enough is enough. You've been presiding over too many collapses. I don't think it's actually been necessarily as bad as some others believe. I do think they've done a good job curating the farm and turning farm players that some of them turn out to be middling and not great. CJ Abrams not looking good for the Nationals right now, into stars, but just a total disregard for building the tertiary pieces and spending so much money on stars that, you know, I would understand if you want to can him. If I had to choose between him and Melvin, I would probably choose AJ Preller. That deserves the blame. But at the same time, at some level, Padres players hit with runners on, right? Like, at some point, we have to be like, this is a player's thing. And a lot of people are watching this team, and I told you there's a reason why I wore this clown hat, and it was because after you got swept by the Dodgers, you got embarrassed on national TV. It shows you, or was it national TV? I forgot it was a national TV game. But regardless, you see Tatis, you see Odor, you see Manny joking around in the clubhouse, which, again, everybody unwinds differently. But it was a bad optic message to send. And it's not like you were in first place or anything. You were bad. You were underperforming at that point. Then you get swept by your rival. And how do you follow that up after your manager then calls you out, reportedly, in the dugout and everything? You lose to the Kansas City Royals, who arguably are worse than the A's, by the way. Yeah, the Kansas City Royals. Then you lose 2 out of 3. That's what brought the clown hat, and I haven't taken it off since. And I honestly don't think I'm going to be able to take it off, unless this team goes on. Now we're reaching the levels of 28-3 New England Patriots over Atlanta Falcons, right? Like, that's that level of turnaround. We're getting close. We're like right there to where if they made a turnaround, it would actually be genuinely shocking. Just overpaid bunch of guys making the sport look bad, embarrassing the Padres, embarrassing Seidler, embarrassing Padres fans who show up and sell out the games every night. You have the Nationals come in and just stomp on you like that? It's embarrassing. It's disgusting, really. I don't know, guys. And again, if you listen to the podcast like every day, first of all, thank you for listening. Love you. Heart, mean it. Kisses, smooches, whatever. And I'm sorry if it feels like I'm coming off as being negative for the 18th day in a row, but there is nothing else to do. The most exciting baseball thing in my life is Immaculate Grid. Yeah, I literally play that while watching the Padres game because I need to be reminded of some things I like about baseball. In this case, it being essentially trivia. That's where we're at. That's where your boy is at right now. Either that or I'm playing video games. Shout out Marvel Snap. Great game. But I don't know, guys. I don't know. Again, we're going to talk more later on in the week about whether or not this team should become sellers. Because it's really a thing. It's really becoming a thing. And if there is a potential trade candidate to go for, bring that up. Got crossovers with Miller Thomas of Locked On Diamondbacks planned. Probably going to cross over with some other folks. Maybe Ethan Smith of Locked On Pirates. We'll see. But holy cow, this team's bad. This team's really, really, really bad. And it's going to be remembered for a long time, I think. And I really do think that it's worse than the collapse. Because at least when the collapse happens, it was, granted, still really heinously bad, but it just felt like, Manny has like an average, a good season for Machado standards, like good, but not great. And he had his best season with the Padres at that point in 2021 was the shortened 2020 season. So it wasn't shocking that he didn't necessarily have MVP quality stuff in him. You have Tatis get really hurt, and then you probably miss, and probably, I mean, like maybe Preller, maybe he couldn't find a suitor for them, but the Will Myers, Eric Hosmer were clearly not the last two of your big four, and they regressed heavily from 2020. Like, there was more things to be expected there. It feels like when you look back and look at that team and look at the players on the team, it looks a little bit more like, okay, don't get me wrong, you didn't have to be historically bad in the second half. Like, again, like that Chargers team, they will choose not just but oh my God, bad in certain areas, right? They are nowhere in between ever. Inconsistency to the max, right? James Harden in the playoffs. He's either dropping 45 points on 20 of 22 shooting, or he is 1 of 16 and 1 of 8 from 3 with 10 turnovers and 5 assists and 8 points, right? There's no in between for the Padres team on what level they can break your heart and disappoint. No in between. But I think that this is worse because you came in with all the expectations. You got the fan fest saying we're going to win it all, the players at least. You have all of them, and then Manny dropping hints, hey, maybe extend Soto next, all these little things. And then you come in, and then you just refuse to stand up and do well. And just an utter refusal. The fans are right there. Maybe it's just me watching the games, and I know I'm going on a little bit long here, but maybe it's just me. Don't you guys feel it? Don't you feel... And there's no way to tangibly kind of, I don't have data on this, but it's like, don't you feel, whether it be Twitter, whether it be the ballpark, like the fandom, be like, yes, all right, this is when we turn it around. They are right there. They are ready to believe in you. The Padres fans, and I know I sound like I'm preaching and I'm going Stephen A. Smith, whatever, I don't care. They are ready to believe in you. Every time they show up, the 10 runs against the Giants, I guarantee you everyone was around on Twitter and everything. They're like, okay, well, maybe this is it. Maybe this is it. When you scored all those runs when you played Miami, and then even if you stunk the next day, whatever. You have all these runs scored. And then you have 10 runs on Friday. And you're like, okay, this is it. They're finally just being okay. All they have to do is do a little bit on offense, specifically. Just a little bit. And you have 4 MVPs at the top of your lineup. That's all we're asking for. And then they take your brain, they take it out of your skull forcibly, step on it 7 times, eat it with a spoon. And then they spit it into a cage full of, or not even a cage, a tank full of piranhas. That's what this Padres team does for you. As I saw someone tweet, they're like, the Padres are that person that goes goblin mode trying at work for 2 days and then just completely takes off for the next week. And honestly, they're relatable. Yeah. Difference between us and them is that we're not getting paid nearly as much and our jobs are, in theory, not as fun. Although I do think people overestimate that these guys do a lot of work. But I'm just saying, that's this Padres team. They hate you. That's the vibe that I get every single time. We're like, yes, this could be the turnaround. It could be one game. They could win 8-2 tomorrow against the Pirates, and I guarantee you fans will be like, okay, is this it? I'm feeling it. I'm ready. But we all know the answer to that question, guys. Are they ready? Nope. Not in the slightest. But with that all being said, everybody, that about does it for today's edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, the only pod that may be better than the Padres themselves. Remember to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts from or watch on YouTube. You can follow me on Twitter at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO, or at LO_Padres. Going to be doing some writing over the next week. One thing on One Piece, which is for some of any of my anime fans out there. And then also going to be writing about the Padres, writing a bunch of other stuff about just baseball. Probably less Padres stuff, to be honest with you, actually, now that I think about it. Just baseball in general. I need to stay away from this team until they give me a reason to write about them other than they stink as the headline and then send SEO go crazy, right? Anyway, that about said, until next time, stay safe, and I suppose stay faithful, my Friar Faithful homies. Take care.